Hello there, welcome back to the Chap's Guide. My name is Ash and I am your host on this journey through men's style, self-development and personal grooming. Now, of all of the items which a person can wear to add interest to their clothing, there is one item which stands apart as being quite special. Something which, if worn by a gentleman, will signal that he is a dapper chap and is prepared to dress his clothing with something which is colourful, which is patterned, which is textured and brings interest to the eye. And of course, it is the pocket square. I am displaying one now. I've got a number on my table, and the pocket square is an interesting item of one's wardrobe because essentially, in the modern era, its only function is for aesthetic display. It is to demonstrate to the world a little bit about you, the wearer of that item. And it's something which, as I say, sets one apart from the hoi polloi of the people out there who predominantly fail to dress their suits or their jackets with a pocket square. Now, like all items of clothing that we choose to add to our ensemble, I like to know a bit about the backstory, because many items which we take for granted today have a history. They have their origins back many hundreds, maybe even thousands of years ago. And if we understand more about our clothing, we're more likely to wear it with passion and flamboyance. And the pocket square indeed has a rich history, which goes back thousands of years. Now, if we look back in the annals of time, we will see ancient Egyptians used to carry a linen handkerchief, we would refer to it today, but a linen piece of cloth which they would use to wipe off their sweat, their perspiration in the hot Egyptian summers. And it set them apart from, the peasants, or whatever you would call the very poor people of that time. This would be something carried by the affluent. And we know, looking back at images which have been captured in hieroglyphics and drawings, that the affluent people would actually colour those squares of linen using things like red oxide, so they would have quite a colourful handkerchief with them. And this became seen as a status symbol. If you could afford to have a colourful piece of cloth to wipe yourself down, it would be seen to be something only the rich could afford to do. Then we spool forward to ancient Greece, where the citizens of the Greek Empire would have that linen piece of material, and they would treat it with perfumes or scent, and they would cover their nose and mouths with it, and the idea being there that it would ward off the evil odours and smells and miasmas of the time, where there was open sewerage and things like that. And people believed that bad odour was what transmitted illness and disease. So they used their handkerchiefs in a way of shielding themselves, protecting themselves from ill health and the like. Now, the habit of carrying a handkerchief in this fashion crossed continents, and it came to Europe, which was at that time, the cultural epicenter of the world. And people started carrying handkerchiefs in the same way that the ancient Grecians and the ancient Egyptians did. But really and truly, the handkerchief at that time wasn't the pocket square as we know it today. It would certainly still have been worn in the trousers rather than any other pockets, and it would have had its origins in functionality rather than display. The real surge in what we call the pocket square today came about in the 1800s, when the two-piece suit and the three-piece suit started to become popular with gentlemen of substance. And of course, when you've got what we would recognise today as a suit, there is a pocket which is kind of superfluous in many respects. It has no real use other than to display something in. And this is where the pocket square found its home, as a place that could be seen in the breast pocket of a gentleman's suit, and it came to display to people a little bit about that individual's personality. Now, in the 20th century, there was a surge again in the use of pocket squares, mostly because of the arrival of cinema. This wonderful media source which everybody could go to, see and be entertained by. And the people who we saw on the screen were very well dressed, dapper men and women of course, but certainly from the men's point of view, these iconically dressed men, and we all know their names, they're often referred to as these people who inhabited the golden age of men's style. We're talking about Cary Grant, we're talking about David Niven and their ilk, people from that era. And of course they were sharply dressed and all wore pocket squares as a matter of course with their suits. And when we saw them on the screen, of course we wanted to emulate that look in our daily lives. And a pocket square is a pretty easy way of enhancing your appearance very simply and very cost effectively. Now I must admit, I've been a fan of the pocket square for as long as I can remember because, I'm not a wealthy man. So in my earlier years, particularly, I maybe only owned 1 or 2 suits. And the way that you could make yourself look a little different each time somebody saw you would be the way in which you dressed your suit with the embellishments. And wearing a different pocket square every time you wear the same suit, particularly if the suit is kind of neutral, if it's grey or whether it's navy, a colourful pocket square brings life and passion to your clothing, and it's easy and very inexpensive to achieve. Inexpensive being the key word, and that's why we're here today. You saw the thumbnail, it said free pocket squares. Now I'm going to tell you how I get free pocket squares. First of all, pocket squares can be an expensive business. If you go to some of the fashion houses, the style houses, the tailoring houses of the finest sartorial streets and avenues of the world, certainly in London, if I went into Turnbull and Asser, for instance, in Jermyn Street, I may pay 50, 60, 70 pounds for a pocket square, which may be wonderful, of course. It would be silk, printed silk with a beautiful image on it, which would be a small work of art. However, I can't afford that. £50 would be the most I've ever paid for a shirt in my life, let alone a pocket square. So I have to achieve my pocket squares at a lot less cost than that. And I found a little way over the years of achieving my pocket squares free of charge. So this is where your free pocket square tip comes along. And how do I do it? Well, a pocket square doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be made of silk. It doesn't have to have some beautiful printed pattern on it. What you want is something with a pattern, with a bit of texture, with a bit of interest. I would suggest a symmetrical or asymmetrical pattern is where you want to go, with a little bit of colour in it. Now in my life, when I've, clothes which I've nearly finished my journey with, so old shirts for instance, I tend to store them and wait for a convenient time to pass them on to somebody else or donate them to charity. But every so often there's something else I do with my shirts which fit the bill, and I have some here on the table. This is how I create my free pocket squares. Now this is an actual pocket square which I purchased, but these fellows here are all old shirts, and as you can see I've many here, collected up many over the years. They're old shirts which I've had done with, right? I have no use for them anymore. They would either have been cut up for use as rags around the house, cleaning cloths, or I can do with what I've done now. And what I have done, I have cut a convenient sized square out of the back of the shirts in question. The key thing is I have used a pinking scissors. Now, for the uninitiated, a pinking scissors is a scissors which has a zigzag pattern in it, so that when you cut out a piece of material, it cuts it in this zigzag form, and that reduces or prevents fraying of that piece of cloth that you've just cut. So it's great for cutting things, for patches and things like that. But a pinking shears, very inexpensive. Once you've bought one, you never need to buy another one again. It's very useful for this sort of purpose. And all I do, I get an existing pocket square. So let me give you an example of how I do this. This is an old shirt which I have no further use for. It's polyester, in fact. It's a trekking shirt. So all I would typically do is get my existing pocket square, place it on the back as a template, then I get my pinking shears, which I've conveniently left under the shirt, and I cut out that square. Then I will be left with a free pocket square, which I can then employ in the future. Now, if you've got a pile of old shirts like I did in my attic, you can get yourself a myriad different pocket squares of all different shapes and patterns. These were all old shirts which were in my collection, which are now pocket squares, and they are of ultimate use to me, whereas as an old shirt about to be thrown away, they were of no value at all. So let me just show you one in practice. So I will take out of my pocket my current pocket square. Now, as you can see, this is an actual pocket square which I purchased in that way. It's being held in place. Here's another little tip for you as well. It was being held in place by this pocket square holder, a simple plastic device which goes in the pocket. You thread your pocket square through the slats and it stops the pocket square falling down in the pocket. Now, these are relatively inexpensive. They cost about $10 for a pack of 3, and I normally buy, I've only ever bought about 4 of them from Amazon. However, here's another little tip. Frugality here, you don't have to buy them. Let me show you what else you can do. Let me just reach down. Here, as you can see, is an old milk carton, right? Empty milk carton. And you can see what I've done. I have actually traced on the side of my milk carton the shape of my pocket square holder. You can guess what happens now. Here's one I made earlier. There is my free pocket square, which I simply cut out of my milk carton. It performs the same function as this, which probably has a cost of about $2 or $3. You can make as many of these as you like, and they're exactly the same. And put them to one side. You don't have to limit it to plastic. You can do it in cardboard as well. So here's a bit of cardboard. Does exactly the same thing, and I'm going to show you it does exactly the same thing. Get rid of that. So get my pocket square, and all I'm going to do, fold it into a inverted triangle, as you can see, and I'm going to feed it through the slats of my pocket square holder. And all this does is assists in maintaining the pocket square, its shape in my pocket. And easily done. Oh, a little bit thick, this material. So let's get that through there. Pull that through my pocket square holder. And now fan it out so it looks rather nice. Slip it into the pocket. There we go. We now have a free pocket square holder. It's cost not a penny. So far, I'm up. And all that you do is repeat that when you get an old shirt and you're ready to turn it into another accessory for your wardrobe. Now, it doesn't matter that it's not made of silk. It doesn't matter that it's not, designed as a pocket square. Here's a little secret. Who's to know? When you see me walking down the street, all you see is that colour, that texture, and that pattern, bringing life and character to my clothing. The number of times I've been wearing an old piece of shirt in my pocket like this, and people have come up to me and said, "That's a lovely pocket square. Where did you get that from?" And the response is, well, it's the back panel off an old shirt which I was going to throw away. Now, don't forget, it doesn't just have to be an old shirt. If you've got, an old pair of curtains you're about to throw out, or any other material around the house which is of no longer any use to you, before you throw it away, just give yourself a mental thought. Could this be employed as a pocket square in my outfit? The more pocket squares you have, the more choice you have, the more interest it is for your clothing. Don't be satisfied with just the minimum. Maybe you can't afford, like me, £50 pocket squares, but I'm sure if you've got some old shirts, you can turn them into some lovely pocket squares, and it just alters the look, doesn't it? So I can change my look as easily as just changing my pocket square, just like that. Hang on, pop that one up there. There we go. Different look again. And I could go through that sort of 25 times here with these old pocket squares. All they need, when you've cut them out, give them an iron, that's it. They're in the collection forever. When you need them, they're there. When you're looking for a pattern just like that to embellish your clothing, it's at hand. And the best thing, it didn't cost a penny, and nobody will ever know. It's our little secret. So there we go, folks. That is how I seem to have a never-ending collection of pocket squares in my jackets and blazers and suits, because I've got loads and loads of these old patches which are now pocket squares in my collection. And some of the shirts actually have relevance to me. So, there are some which take me back to a time in my life, like, let me show you one here. This was part of an old summer shirt that I used to wear. Many happy memories. It's a little bit garish, it's a little bit in your face. However, as a pocket square, it serves a great purpose, particularly if I'm wearing sort of a linen jacket in the summertime. It brings a lot of colour. And every time I wear it, it puts my mind back to that period of my life when this, as a shirt, was on my back. There's a bit of sentimentality there because it doesn't die. It doesn't go on to shirt nirvana. It stays with me and it stays making new memories in its new format. So there we go. If you have enjoyed this video, you would do me a favour if you give the video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content like this, click that red button and subscribe. If you'd like to practically support the channel, it's easy to do that by buying me a coffee. And if you go to the show notes below, you will find the link to my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you will also find my other free materials, like quite regular podcasts in which I give other tips and ideas about men's style, self-development, and personal grooming. So until the next time, wear your pocket squares with pride and passion, and I will see you again very soon.